Good evening, friends. This is Rahul Magan here is a Group Chief Executive Officer at Treasury Consulting and also a venture capitalist. While we have multiple economists on the boards, those who have their multiple definitions of how you can predict a recession. Well, they have multiple barometers which they are and multiple red flags which they claiming that how the economic as and when economic recession is about to come. I don't know how far we are away from recession, but one thing which I'm sure is that recession is round the corner, and this time recession will wipe out trillions of dollars of wealth, and the so-called SoftBank and Sequoia will also lose. Well, the story of the WeWork have already led to a big hit, and soon we're going to have a video about the fund accounting as well. But nonetheless, today we're going to talk about one of the indicators of how the recession will happen. And that indicator, I'm not concerned, but Bank for International Settlement, which is Basel, is also concerned. On a very often note, they're talking about the XVAs, which is valuation adjustment, which are of 8. And predominantly of them is 2. Well, for me, all 8 are important, to be honest. I'm not saying that that one is more important than another. For me, all 8 are important, that's for sure. But one which is predominantly important is the CVA and DVA too, basically. Well, the banks are always CVA focused because they receive something for that, while I am net CVA focused, which is net of CVA and DVA. If CVA, net CVA, which is CVA minus DVA, CVA stands for credit valuation adjustment. For all those people, those who are watching this video, firstly, they should know that the credit valuation adjustment means that what would if your client fails. So example, Genpact, which is an ITS company, only for the sake of example. Genpact is taking a position of export side with JP Morgan Mumbai, and JP Morgan Mumbai will always consider that what if Genpact default. They will cover Genpact in the CDS market, which is credit default swap market. India do not have a CDS market, so actually they cover in the Singapore market. They cover Genpact in the CDS market, sitting in India, in Singapore, and here RBI never feel the shame. Anyways, they cover that, and this cost is known as the CVA. So exporter get net of CVA price and importer will get add up CVA price. These are all technical words. While there is another thing which the law suggests, which is DVA, which is debit valuation adjustment. What would if that bank default? What would if JP Morgan Chase default? If you are net CVA, which means that the probability of yours default is pretty lesser than the probabilities of the bank default. I'm talking from the bank angle, that if the probability of yours default is pretty lesser than the probability of Genpact default, then you are net, then you are CVA plus. While if it's CVA minus, net CVA minus, which means that the probability of the Genpact default is little lower than the probability of JP Morgan Chase will default. But unfortunately, the problem in this issue is that no banks give you CVA and DVA figures. And finding that bank in the bank's balance sheet is really tough because they do not report at the quarter level. They only report at the yearly level. So I today can go to Google and check JP Morgan, Standard Chartered, UBS, Barclays, HSBC and whatnot. I can go and open their annual report and know how to check the DVA, CVA. But once I go to check the DVA, I get the figure reported 31st December 2018. But today is September. It is September. Now what to do? Now the mess up in the scene is that since it is not recorded on a real-time basis, even on the Reuters and the Bloomberg, it's pretty tough to get that figure. But there is additional information that came in the public domain recently, 1 week before, that raised a lot of eyebrows in the public domain. Where this information came that US Bank reported highest CVA in the last few years. And this information suggests that all 8 US systematically important bank. You know that what is the definition of the systematically important bank? You have 2 types of systematically important bank, which is GSIB, Global Systematically Important Bank, which is Goldman, JP, Citi and all. While you have DSIB, Domestically Systematically Important Banks. While for example, if you go to the Singapore, then the DBS, ICBC, UOB, it's a part of that. For India, it is SBI, Punjab National Bank and HDFC and all. So all the 8 US systematically important banks, they face the highest CVA. On an aggregate level, the CVA rose by, basically the delta is $845 million. $845 million of CVA got rose, basically recorded in the books of accounts of banks and also in the corporate side. More importantly, the last recorded CVA, or basically the last quarter, is 11.45 billion. 11.45 billion, while this time it is recorded 12.3 billion. And the delta is approximately 845 million, which is approximately 6%. While JP Morgan constitute the highest increase, which is 249 million, on a flat note 250 million, which is the delta of 8%. So they have increased now to 3.57 billion. So out of 12.3 billion of the total CVA of the all 8 systematically important banks, JP Morgan constitute 3.57, which is roughly 29% of the total. While Goldman is not far. All those people, those who claim that Goldman is an investment banker and not a bank, they should heard this, that Goldman also recorded a rose in the CVA by 214 million, which is an increase of 11%, 3%, 300 pips, 3 big figures higher than the JP Morgan, and they have now reached at $2 billion. The cumulative increase of 16.2 on a flat note 16%. I once again say that multiple economists have multiple definitions of recession. They have multiple definition of deflation, stagflation, recession, depression, boom and all. We hardcore foreign exchange people have our definition of recession. We have like the invert curves, we have the belly of the curve, we have the US Treasury curves, and we have our own definitions, and we never worry what people think about us. While if the banks, US bank are recording the highest CVA on a quarter-on-quarter note, and the increment, which is delta, is not 100 million, 200 million, rather it is 845 million, which is 0.85 billion approximately. Over 80% of a billion, right? This is a mess. This is a mess. Although, before closing this video, I take an indemnification that I do not have the DVA figures with me, but one thing I'm sure that even if I have the DVA debit valuation adjustment figures with me, that would be netto, and I net off CVA, then it has to be positive, because I am talking about the top 8 GIBs, which is global systematic important banks for the US. It has to be positive CVA, because we're talking about the top 8. We are talking about the quarter 1. We're not talking about the last quarter. So mess off have actually started, and the financial markets have started recording this, and last DTCC, Depository Trust Corporation, recorded 5% shrank in the volume. 5%, which is pretty big. I don't know how many people those who are watching this video actually know what DTCC is, Depository Trust Corporation, and what exactly they do. And how come, what is the difference between NST and CST, and how they actually work it out. But one thing which is pretty clear in the mind has to be very clear in the mind of everybody, that the signals are pretty decent that recession is around the corner, and we're going to face this recession pretty high this time. I'm telling you, pretty high. Stay tuned. And you know my mobile number, which is +91 9899242978. You know our fixed income platform, www.fixedincome.global. We have a WhatsApp group where we talk a lot about the financial markets. In case you have the credentials, you can join the same. And in case you have the trainings requirement, you can contact us. We provide a lot of trainings. This is just one side of the business which we do. Have a great time. Enjoy soon.